To create a brand new family from scratch, go to the big R at the top of the screen, click on it, and then choose New, and then Family. From here, browse to where your family templates are. In this case, we'll create a generic model. So choose a generic model template and click Open. From here, it brings you into a brand new window. And you can see that since this is a 3D model, in the browser window to the left, it not only has a plan view, but it also has a front view and a back, a left and right view, and even a 3D view. I'll go back to the floor plan view reference level. And before we start laying anything out, it's a good idea to change out what its category is. As a generic model, it's just left its category as generic, but unlike AutoCAD, which has layers, since Revit doesn't have layers to organize what things belong to, it uses categories. So you want to try to avoid it being generic as much as possible, just to keep your model more organized. So go to the category button under the Home tab and choose category. From here, I'll change it from generic models to, in this case, we'll just make a simple box, but we'll just call it out as light fixture. So I'll choose lighting fixtures and hit OK. Now that we set it up as a lighting fixture, before we start drawing out any geometry, if you want to make this thing parametric, meaning you want to set up parameters that someone can later adjust, then you really need to lay it out by using reference planes. Because it's these reference planes that are dimensioned and move, and that's what will make the model move and change shape and size. So to make our basic box, we're just going to lay down reference planes that define all of its edges. So in the Home tab, grab the reference plane tool. I'm just going to lay one out for the left side of our box. And if I select it, a temporary construction dimension appears that lets me kind of move it into place. And when I select it, you want to define for Revit what edge this is defining. So under its reference, I'll just define it as a left side and then give it a name left. Then I can mirror it using the mirror tool on the other side, and selecting it, I can define this under its properties as the right side of the box and call it right, and do the same for the front and back. In Revit, the bottom of the screen is going to be the front face of this box. And finally, the back. So you've got all four sides laid out, but remember it is a 3D box, so you need to go to the front view under elevations to lay out reference planes for what are going to be the top and bottom sides as well. It's a little tricky when you're laying a reference plane over this existing reference level that's laying down for you. To find it again, hover over the area and then use your tab key to toggle through all these overlapping edges until you see the text in the bottom left of the screen that is your reference plane. You can choose it, define it as the bottom, and name it. So now that you have all the reference planes defining all the sides of your box, you want to start dimensioning them so that you could add parameters to them. So I'll go back to a floor plan view, and I'll lay out a dimension that will be the width. So going to the Annotation tab, I'll choose the Align Dimension tool. And starting from the left, I'll go over to the right, and then click the place. Then I'll escape out of the Dimension tool. And to tell this dimension to be a parameter, in this case our width, you want to select the dimension, and then you'll notice in the option bar at the top, this green strip, you have a label pull down menu. If you pull down, that's where you have the option to add this as a parameter. Click Add Parameter. This brings up your parameter properties window where you can give it a name. In this case, I'll call it width. It's going to be a type parameter. If it were an instance parameter, then it only changes the width for that box you have selected. As a type parameter, it will change the width of all the boxes of the same type. It's automatically defined this type of parameter as a length parameter, and it's grouping it with the dimensions here. So I'll hit OK. Now I'll do the same for the depth. So I'll grab the dimension tool, place to lay it out. I'll escape out of the dimension tool, select it, click to add a parameter, and call it depth. Now I want to go to the front view and place a parameter for its height. So click front, dimension, and remember to dimension to the reference plane, not the level. You want to dimension to the bottom reference plane you defined. So hovering over the level, use the tab key until you find that bottom reference plane you placed. Click again to place the dimension. I escaped out of the dimension tool and selected it, and then changed it to add a parameter and call it height. Now that all the your dimensions are laid down and you've applied parameters to them, it's a good idea at this point to start testing the parameters you've created. So clicking on the Properties button, so if you go to the Home tab, choose the Family Types button to bring up your properties. Here you'll see all the parameters that you've created. I can change the height parameter here, and hopefully it'll change it in the model, and hit Apply. And it did. Go back to the floor plan view. Let's bring up the family types again and start changing out the width. Apply. And then the depth. You can see that it's changed them, but it's shifted it from the center. So a way to constrain that, to keep the center always in the center, is to lay down some more dimensions. So I'm going to go ahead and hit undo a couple times to bring me back to that width. And this time I'm going to place a dimension in a string and then equally constrain that center to always stay in the middle. So to do that, go to the Annotate tab and choose Aligned. Click on the left, this time in the middle, then on the right side. Drag it up and then click to place the dimension. I'll hit Escape a couple times, get out of the Dimension tool. Now it's laid out this dimension to the middle. If I select it, if I've placed the dimension in a string, I should have the option to hit EQ, which will equally constrain it. I'll do this for depth as well. Place the dimension, and then hit EQ to equally constrain it. Now if I test these dimensions by clicking on the Family Types button and change its width and depth and hit Apply, it keeps the center line in the middle of the property, in the middle of the component. So now all that the dimensions are all and the parameters are all working, it's time to start laying out the geometry to make the box. So go to the Home tab, and we're going to extrude the box using the Extrusion tool. This brings you into an edit mode. From here, I'll use the Line tool to draw out what will be the profile of our box. This has to be a closed loop, so there can't be any open areas of it. I'll hit Escape a couple times to get out of the Drawing tool. Once it's been laid out, I'm going to go ahead and align and lock the edges of the box to the reference planes. It's the reference planes that move based on the parameters, and it's the box that's going to be glued to these planes that will move with it, and that's what makes the component move and makes it parametric. So to align and lock it, use the Align tool at the top left corner here. Then click the reference plane and then the edge to bring it down. It'll bring it down, and then click the padlock to lock it in place. And go ahead and do that for all the faces. So on the right side, I'll click the reference plane, move the edge over, and click lock. Then the front, and then the left. Once you've got it all done in plan, hit the green check mark to click OK. And then you need to go to a front view to align and lock the top and the bottoms. So go to the front view. And you can see it's laid out our box for us, but it's given it kind of an arbitrary height. So using the Align tool, I'll align the top and then the bottom. You can see it's kind of slid down here. So I can move the box up to our 0, 0 by selecting the reference planes. And since the box is aligned and locked to the reference planes, when I hit the Move tool, the box should go with them. And it does. Now that all the edges are aligned and locked, I can go to a 3D view and we should be able to see our box in place. And now I'll test the parameters again to make sure that all the geometry is moving with our parameters that we've made. So with the family types button, I'll click it and I'll just change its width, height, and depth. And it works. And you can make as any kind of shape that you want to using the extrusion tools. You can make it as many as you want to too. This can get as complicated as you want to. Just make sure you're using reference planes to define the edges. It could be more than one box at a time. Every time you create an extrusion or a shape, if you select it, you'll see that it has a couple of properties already set out for you. Every extrusion has a visibility property that you can turn on and off, and a material, so you can define what it's made out of. But there's no way to change those once it's brought into your project unless you create parameters for people to change. So to create these parameters, go to the Family Types button, and this time you're going to add a new parameter by clicking Add to the right. And we'll make a material parameter to change the material of this box. So I'll call it material. It can be a type or an instance parameter. In this case, I'm going to just make it a type. And now instead of a length for its type of parameter, I'm going to use the pull-down menu and choose material. It automatically changes it to group it with the rest of the materials and finishes. I'll just hit OK. You can see now a material parameter has been placed in our family types. I'll hit OK to get out of that window. And now to link up that parameter with this box's material, I'm just going to choose the box, which brings up our properties. And for its material, you'll see a little button to the far right of this property. If I click on that button, now I can link that material property with the parameter I've created. So I'll click material, and that will link it up. I can also do the same for its visibility. So I'll create a visibility parameter. So click on family types. Here I'll add a new parameter, and I'll just call it box visibility. And this time for the type of parameter that it is, I'll pull it down, and it either is or it isn't visible. So I'll choose the yes/no parameter, which will give us a check mark. Under the group of parameter it belongs to, let's group it with graphics. So pull it down and then choose graphics. Once I hit OK, you can see in the family types a graphics grouping, and you can see the parameter I've created, which is called box visibility. I'll hit OK. Now I'll grab the box again, and under its properties you can see its visibility property. I'll click the radio button, and I'll link it with that parameter I created called box visibility, and hit OK. Now that I've got all the parameters laid out and everything I want, it's time to save it out. So use the big R, pull it down, choose Save As, Family. Save it in somewhere on your computer. I'll call it generic light fixture. And now once it's saved and you've given it a name, if you have another project open, hit Load into Project to bring it in. From here, you should be able to place the component, and when you select it, if you go to Edit Type, you'll see all your parameters to change them there.